It is Groundhog Day, February 2nd, 2007. The groundhog did see a shadow, so I guess we're having more winter. It is 2 minutes after 1 o'clock. We do want to start on time. We do not have a quorum at this point in time, but we're going to begin testimony so that we can leave the room at 2:30. I have an engagement, and if we do need to have to go to overtime, just to announce to everyone, we will be here at 10 o'clock tonight. So we expect to get through these two bills, but if we do need to come back, it will be at 10 o'clock. That being said, first bill on the agenda is Senate File 85. Chief author is Senator Matthews. Welcome to the committee and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. I appreciate the opportunity.
One second. Senator Senjum.
Mr. Chair, I think it's important for the audience to know, and you can correct me, but you know, the idea of coming back at 10 o'clock is not offered in a facetious way. I believe that you have a funeral wake for your father tonight. Is that right?
You are correct. Well, I have personal business. It's the wake for my father who died last week. I do want to give the bills as much time as, and I appreciate you bringing that up. I didn't want to bring it up in front of the crowd, but my father is having his funeral tomorrow, and we have the wake tonight.
Right.
So I appreciate that. That is why I would do it at 10 o'clock tonight, not because I'm vindictive, but more because I really cannot be here past 2:30 today.
And Mr. Chair, I just wanted the audience to know that because
Thank you.
It's important for them to know that.
Thank you. Senator Matthews, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It is a privilege of mine to introduce Senate File 85. It is the most important issue that's faced my district, and I'm asking the committee to help bring some clarity to what is the most important issue facing my district with the power and the energy needs, not only for my district, but for all of central Minnesota. With that, to get it in the language that I would like, Mr. Chair, I'd like to move the A2 delete all amendment, which will put the bill in the form I desire.
Senator Matthews moves the A2 amendment. Before we proceed with that, I will announce we do have a quorum. And Senator Matthews renews his motion for the A2 amendment. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. That is an author's amendment, and it gets the bill into the shape you like. Please proceed, Senator Matthews.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. The Sherco Power Plant provides roughly 2,400 megawatts of energy for the whole region in central Minnesota, and it employs and provides about 350 to 700 jobs, depending on time of year and other varying factors with it. And the history behind it is several years ago, Xcel announced a plan to close down 2 of the 3 units at the Sherco plant and convert that to a natural gas combined cycle plant. In addition to that, they proposed adding more wind and more solar to their proposal to make up the megawatts usage that will be needed, and went through the long process before the PUC in order to get this plan approved. And last fall, the PUC agreed to approve the plan to close the coal plants and approved the new wind and the new solar, but decided to hold off on approving a gas plant and left a vacuum, not only for our district and for the jobs that it will impact in that community, but also for the region and the baseload power. So this has caused a great uncertainty for my district, not only for jobs, but also for the energy and following this process for the last 2 years. And that is why it is important to bring some clarity to this issue, to ask this committee and to ask the legislature to help finish the process that should have been completed at the agency last year. And with that, I do have several testifiers that will help explain the bill from various viewpoints. So with your permission, Mr. Chair, I'd invite Mr. Rick Evans.
First up, Rick Evans, and followed by Mayor Tracy Bertram of Becker. Welcome to the committee. Please state your name and proceed with your testimony.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I'm Rick Evans with Xcel Energy. I'd like to just first go over very quickly what Senator Matthews has accomplished with his delete all amendment. This represents a lot of work among a group of stakeholders and Senator Matthews in bringing this bill into a form that I think is a good bill for lots of folks. So I'm going to go through that fairly quickly, and of course we can answer questions if there are any. Initially, there was a notwithstanding clause in the bill that covered a broad range of pretty much everything in the whole wide world, and we were asked if we could limit that to the statutes we were focusing on, which we did. So this is the notwithstanding clause now applies to the Certificate of Need statute and the citing statute, which are the two things that this bill accomplishes without the need of those statutes. In addition, there was a request by some stakeholders that we include a process where the size of the plant could be revisited. We will file another resource plan in 2019 or thereabouts, and at that point we'll be looking at our 15-year planning horizon, and at that point, if the utility and the PUC agreed that the plant needed to be resized, that opportunity would be there without having to come back and change the legislation. And so Senator Matthews agreed to the amendment that would accomplish that. We added, or rather revised, made a new paragraph B to put the discussion of the rate case. It's important for the committee to understand that not one single dime of this plant will be charged to customers until it has gone through a rate case, just like every other asset we own. We're not exempting ourselves from that process at all, and we revised paragraph B in order to make that crystal clear. There was some ambiguity in the way it was drafted earlier, which was unintentional, but this plant will not be added to our customers' bills until it has gone through a full rate case with the Public Utilities Commission. And then finally, we added paragraph C. It has become the practice lately in certificates of need, which is what we are being exempted from in this bill, for the utility to come in with a forecasted budget for the plant that we intend to build. It's actually not even really described in the Certificate of Need statute, but it's become the practice. Some of the stakeholders came in and said they would like to have that forecasted budget so that when it comes up in a rate case some years later, they would have a benchmark to measure against. In addition, we would be required to hire an independent evaluator to evaluate that forecasted budget and give the PUC information about their view of the forecasted budget. So it's just one more data point before construction that would then be available after construction in order to have a benchmark for the costs. So that was those were some of the things that we talked about with a number of stakeholders to add some protections to the bill, and that was the intent of Senator Matthews' author's amendment. I think I want to thank Senator Matthews for agreeing and working with us on those things. Those are important things to accomplish. I want to talk a little bit about the need for this bill, and of course the primary need Senator Matthews has already discussed, which is to give some certainty to the people of Becker, the people of Sherburne County, the region of central Minnesota. They are making a sacrifice as we go through this large transition of our baseload assets. They're losing a lot of jobs, they're losing a lot of tax base in their community, and the primary driver behind this bill is to make sure that those jobs are replaced as much as possible. Another driver of the bill is just jobs in general. Building the plant that we're contemplating here is going to create a lot of construction jobs. Xcel Energy builds plants with union labor. That is not always the case, but it's the case with Xcel Energy. Xcel operates the plants with union labor, and so this is important. I think you'll get some testimony later today about the importance of the jobs that are created by this, very important project. From Xcel Energy's point of view, this is also important for us to establish some certainty, and I just want to refer you, I think in your packet there's a chart like this that shows our baseload resources on a timeline. The primary driver behind my company's decision to start to close down Sherco 2 and Sherco 1 is based on this timeline. If you look at the planned outages, which is what we've proposed, or the planned shutdown in 2023 and then 2026, only 4 years later, the Monticello nuclear plant's license expires. And it's not in our control or the state of Minnesota's control whether that license gets renewed. That's going to be a federal decision. And what the cost would be of renewing that license is also a federal decision. 3 years later, Prairie Island 1. 1 year after that, Prairie Island 2. And so my bosses were looking at this when they were putting together our last resource plan and saying we cannot have a traffic jam or a log jam of large baseload plants being on the bubble in the 2030s. We need to start planning ahead. And so that was the main driver from our company's point of view in proposing the shutdown of the 2 coal plants. But it was essential if we're going to lose that baseload power, which essentially is operated 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for the most part, that we cannot just replace it with the 1,400 or so megawatts of renewable energy that we proposed as a part of this plan. We need to have the gas plant in order to back those things up when the wind's not blowing and the sun's not shining. In addition, and I'm no engineer, as probably most of you know, and I can have an engineer come and talk to you if you want, but I'll tell you, when you have that much energy coming onto our grid in that location and you take it off, you create voltage problems. These are big problems for our customers, particularly that run industrial plants where a consistent quality of voltage is required. And so something needs to be put in that location, something like this plant that we're proposing, in order to support the voltage in that area. You have now exhausted my knowledge of that subject, but I'd be happy to bring someone in who could explain it more if you'd like. But the point is, we need some certainty as we start moving into this period of time when so many of our baseload plants are sort of on this bubble that creates some uncertainty. And so to the extent we can reduce that uncertainty, that's what we're trying to accomplish with this plan. I know from now to 2034 looks like a long time to most of us, but in the utility business, that's very quick. Our next resource plan is going to reach out from 2019 to 15 years. That's, I think, 2020 or 2034. So we're already starting to look at the plans for 2030, 2033, and 2034. And the intent of this bill is to reduce the uncertainty, not only for the city of Becker and for the jobs, but also for Xcel Energy and its planning purposes. I've already mentioned there's 2 points I'd like to make in conclusion. The first one that I've already made, but I'll reiterate, not one dime of this plant goes on a customer's bill until we have gone through a rate case with the Public Utilities Commission. This bill changes nothing about that process. Number 2, it is, I'm tempted to say we have more energy on our system that didn't require a certificate of need than we have energy that did require a certificate of need. The concern that people have raised that somehow we are dodging some essential element of the process I guess I'd like to address that. Since 1994, we have been required to put biomass energy on our system. We have been required to put wind energy on our system. We have been required to put solar energy on our system. All of those things were driven by public policy through the legislative process. Not one of them was driven by the Public Utilities Commission process. And in every one of those cases, when the legislature decided as a matter of public policy that a certain kind of generation should go on our system, they were exempted from a certificate of need. None of the wind on our system has ever been subjected to a certificate of need. None of the solar, none of the biomass. Just to give you the most recent example, in 2013, the legislature, not the PUC, but the legislature, required us to create the Community Solar Garden Program. Under the Community Solar Garden Program, we take the energy when a developer proposes it. It's in a location that the developer proposes, and it doesn't even run through a rate case. The money just flows straight through from our customers to the developers. And not 1 megawatt of that energy is subject to a certificate of need. And the current line to get on our system is over 1,000 megawatts. 33% larger than the plant we're proposing here is currently waiting in line to get put on our system, never had a certificate of need, never was part of a resource plan, and we have to take it whether we need it or not. It is typical when the legislature requires generation for public policy purposes to not require a certificate of need. That's what Senator Matthews' bill does here today. We do We need this energy on our system. It is an intelligent public policy move for the Minnesota legislature, and as has happened many times in the past, should be exempt from the certificate of need. I'd be happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Normally, I would have the other testifiers come up, but I'm pretty sure that members of the committee probably have at least a couple questions for Excel rather than wasting his time going back and forth. Are there any questions for Mr. Evans? Senator Marty?
Mr. Chair, I was going to ask if you wanted questions now or after all the testimony. I don't care, but you'd rather do it now?
I think now, thank you, Senator Murray. I think now only because we can cut down on the travel time between the seats.
Okay, then, thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Evans, you and I have talked about this. I think you've talked with a lot of members here. I'm curious, it is an end run around the process, and somebody gave me statements that your vice president or head of regulatory affairs was saying back in October about we're very comfortable with the certificate of need, and they have lots of quotes on how the process is fine, and we would study whatever alternatives got brought forward as part of the certificate of need, make sure we're moving forward with the resource needed, and provides for alternatives to be evaluated for things to look at so we can make sure we're moving ahead consistent. What changed?
Mr. Evans?
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, well, a number of things changed. The city of Becker is looking for some certainty that this moves forward. That's an important public policy question that Senator Matthews has brought to the committee here. That is not really a consideration necessarily of Xcel Energy, but it's a consideration for the city of Becker, Sherburne County, for region, for the people who have those jobs in those districts. The certainty that the construction trades is looking for, that they will have some jobs in the future located in Minnesota that'll be union jobs because Xcel Energy provides union jobs. That has changed. And in addition, as we looked at and I don't know who gave you the quote that you had, but I'm tempted to just say, well, we changed our mind. We really want to get this plant started. We need to get this started as we move forward and look at the planning. There was significant testimony in the resource plan, and I think some agreement by some of the commissioners that it was important to get this piece nailed down before we start moving on to the more difficult problems of dealing with the nuclear plants that are coming down the road.
Mr. Chair.
Senator Marty.
Mr. Chair, following up on that, I understand all those concerns, and I mean, you had a similar bill last year. I think this was I think last year's bill was less reasonable, maybe the way I'd put it. And at the time, I think I told you that I think you make a persuasive case on why Xcel might own the thing, why it would likely be in Becker for both jobs and community things, but also for the grid reasons and so on. I understand all that. At the time, I think I told you that at the time I was chairing the Energy Committee, and I told you I didn't think that as persuasive as you might be to us, that I don't think I and Representative Garofalo, the House Chair at the time, that we and 201 of our colleagues were the appropriate ones to make those decisions. And timelines, I mean, I understand the Becker concerns, the employee concerns, all those things have been out there all the time. And your head of regulatory affairs, this was at IRP hearings at the commission in this October, and saying, and I think the timeline gives you at least a couple of years. If you had worst case scenario stuff, would be there. I don't doubt that it's likely to be a combined cycle natural gas plant in Becker. I don't doubt that. But why the end run now? I frankly think Xcel ratepayers, they have the issues that, I mean, when your new amendment, I think that in some ways is better, but it still gives you at your sole discretion to either do the 780 whatever megawatts or revise it. The way I read it is you get to make the choice, and if you choose not to revise it with your new IRP, then you can go ahead with this, and it seems to me even saying reasonable and prudently incurred costs, you can say, well, the state law told us we have the sole discretion to do that. That's reasonable and prudent. So I guess I'm concerned. As I said, I think it's likely to be a combined cycle plant in Becker, but I think when I asked you a while back, how big is it going to be? I said, was it about 750? And you said you thought so. It was in the docket. Yeah, I think it's 786. But what if things changed in the last couple of years since you started, since the RP came up with this size and everything else? And what if it should be 600 megawatts? Other prices are falling. And in terms of using it to fill in the gaps, to deal with the cycles of demand for wind and so on. Your IRP, which put this in, has 0 for hydro, and you and I have talked about why you don't, because it's a negotiation issue. But I think you and I and everybody here probably expects that you'll have a contract at some point with hydro, which also does dispatchable stuff. So I guess my question is, why should we as legislators be doing it? It clearly is an end run around the process. And I think you understandably are here because you want to give your shareholders more certainty. I understand that, but it is an end run. And I really think the commission is there for a reason, that they're supposed to be listening to you, they're supposed to be listening to the employees, they're supposed to be listening to all the other folks who are looking at this and all the interveners. So I guess I'm just, I think that what you said last year, in the end, I don't know, you chose not to pursue the bill last year. I wish you wouldn't this year, because I think you're going to likely end up with pretty much the same thing. And if it doesn't end up as the same thing, it would only be because the commission, hearing from you and everybody else, including, again, you, including Xcel, I should say, would be persuaded that it should be, I'm not guessing a different thing, but a different size, perhaps. And this takes out it strikes me as this language takes away the commission's ability to change the size, unless Xcel says we want to change the size.
Mr. Evans, I'm not sure where the question is. I sort of lost track, but
Okay.
if you'd like to respond.
Well, I mean, there's a couple of things that I can say. First of all, the author's amendment that Senator Matthews put on today gives us the responsibility to come in, well, we have a responsibility anyway to come in with a resource plan. We've been coming in with resource plans for a long time. We've been located in Minnesota for over 100 years. We are a very important part of this community, we think, we hope. We're a very important part of the communities that we serve. We're a very important part of the communities where our plants are located. To suggest that somehow we would come in and propose a plant that was unnecessary to serve our customers, I think there's no history of that. We provided the opportunity to revisit the size of the plant in the resource plan. And yes, absolutely, we reserve the right for us to be the one to propose it and to get the PUC to agree to it. I don't think that that's unreasonable at all under these circumstances. I guess the other thing I would say is, and I'll go through it quickly. In 1994, we were required by the legislature, not the PUC, to put 125 megawatts of biomass power on our system. 33 megawatts out of the second 75 could go to St. Paul District Heating under the statute. 10 megawatts up to 20 megawatts would be located north of Constitutional Route 8 in northern quarter of Minnesota. That was the Minnesota legislature requiring that, exempt from a certificate of need. In 1994, we were ordered by the Minnesota legislature, not the PUC, to put 225 megawatts of wind by December of 1998 and another 200 megawatts of wind by December of 2002. By PUC order, we could be required to add another 400 megawatts of wind by 2002. It only applied to a utility that owns a nuclear power plant, and it did not require a certificate of need. In 2001, the legislature, not the PUC, wanted us to change the High Bridge plant and the Riverside plant from coal to natural gas. They provided us with a process to do that. It did not require a certificate of need. In 2003, we were ordered to sign a contract with an innovative energy project located on the Iron Range for 450 megawatts of coal-fired generation. It was specifically exempt from a certificate of need. In 2007, we were ordered to put 15% of our energy from renewable resources by 2010, 18% by 2012, 25% by 2016, and 30% by 2020. Not 1 kilowatt of that energy required a certificate of need. It was required by the legislature, not the Public Utilities Commission. In 2013, the solar standard was added, and as I already mentioned, the community solar garden standard was added. More than 1,000 megawatts currently in line to come on our system, specifically exempted from a certificate of need. The legislature has a long history of participating in choosing generation resources, and in every single case that they've done it, they have exempted us from a certificate of need. The reasons to put this plant at Becker have to do with the people of Becker, with the people of Sherburne County, with the jobs that it will create, and with the certainty that it creates for us going forward as we do the planning going into the 2030s. That's the public policy. I understand that people may disagree with that public policy, and of course that's everyone's right. But at the end of the day, when the legislature decides as a matter of public policy to endorse a generation resource, they have exempted it from a certificate of need.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. I'll come back to Senator Marty in just a second. I just wanted to make an announcement. Cell phones inside of this chamber must be in the off position or silent position. 2 of them have already gone off. Please respect the chamber itself and the hearing process. Secondly, signs are not allowed in the chamber. If you do have a sign, please take it to the back and remove it from the chamber. Thank you. Senator Marty.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Evans. I did let you go along with your litany because I knew I'm very familiar with those.
Anyway.
But I let you go ahead because I think it's fair to do that. I think that most of those cases, and some of those were things I wasn't thrilled with, and some of them were ones that I thought were reasonable. Those were ones where, for public policy reasons, the legislature actually, I think, worked with Xcel. In many cases, some of them you may say no, and I agree. But they were ones that were proposed for separate public policy purposes. This is one that, and when we've talked, I told you, I don't represent Senator Matthews' district, but I'm very much concerned about the jobs there, very much concerned about the grid stability there, all those issues. However, this is one that I think this is actually being initiated by Xcel because I would argue you want some things that I think you should want. In other words, certainty for your shareholders and everybody else. I understand that. I'm just saying that we have a good process here, and this was initiated by Xcel for that purpose. I have a couple of very specific questions. I don't want to take too long.
Senator
I know
Marty?
there are lots of things going on. But real quickly, could you talk about the cost of the pipelines? Because I hear the project would be about $800 million. How much is the natural gas pipelines?
Mr. Evans.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, the area where we're proposing to build the plant is going to need a new gas supply. That process is a separate process that will occur in the Public Utilities Commission, possibly at the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. There's a jurisdictional question depending on where the gas is coming from and how it's being delivered. So that process is not changed by this bill. There are 3 potential sources of gas. The cost of each of those would be different. The availability of gas from each of those would be different. So that's a process that will occur in the ordinary course of regulatory law. This bill does not affect those whatsoever.
Senator Marty.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I recall that $200 million was the estimate you used in one. I don't know if it was a filing or where for the pipeline. Do you know if that's gone up or down, the estimates?
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I guess, you know, I don't know where that number comes from. I mean, if it was in one of our filings, you know, it may have been an estimate from delivering from one of the pipelines where the gas is available. So you know, if it was in our filing, I'm sure it's true.
Okay.
Senator Marty.
Yep. It was a 2013 filing. All I have is the Xcel page saying a new 88-mile line would be required approximately $200 million. It says Xcel at the bottom, a life cycle management study, but you haven't heard anything that would reduce it. It would be presumably $200 million or more.
Mr. Evans.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I guess I don't want to speculate. There's three sources of gas that we've looked at in the region, and I think that process of determining which one is the optimal and how much gas and how much it would cost is a separate process that's not impacted by this process, whether it's a certificate of need or not. You know, that's really a separate question.
Okay. And
Senator Marty?
And, Mr. Chair, I think this is final question, and that is, as I said, I expect that with this legislation, without, you're likely to end up with a combined cycle thing in Becker. How big it is and everything else, I'm not sure. And the rate recovery, I'm very concerned because short-circuiting the process, I think it changes against the consumer interest, the rates that you might recover. But I've heard from some people around the Capitol, and I don't know if it's accurate or not. They say if you don't get this legislation that Xcel may reconsider the decision to shut down Circle 1 and 2. I haven't heard that from Xcel. You're not, is that true? Is that something that's on the table? Is it something?
Mr. Evans?
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, we plan to go forward with the plan that we filed with the Public Utilities Commission. I think I'd be overstepping my bounds and lose my job if I went much beyond that. So, I think, we talk about certainty in the future. Nothing is certain in the future. I mean, there's many things that could happen, as you mentioned, that might change these plans. But we still have to make plans, and we still have to start planning these things, and we need to work our way along. So I don't want to start speculating about that one way or the other. I probably already said too much, but it is our plan to go forward with the resource plan that we filed. That's what we're trying to accomplish here, is to go forward with the resource plan that we filed.
Senator Marty?
Mr. Chair, just because I had been hearing people who are doubting that, and I mean, I don't know that you could on your own undo that, nor would it make sense in the public's eye or anything else. But I appreciate your telling me what you can, because I've been hearing people saying, oh, they may back out of that deal if this doesn't happen. And anyway, I'll just close by saying I think you would likely get very similar plant to this in Becker, but I don't know the size, I don't know everything else, and I'm very concerned about the rate process, because right now, if you have to say, here's what it's going to cost, you have incentives in the future to drive it up. If 2% more means 2% more for shareholders. Right now, you have that incentive perhaps, but you also have the incentive through the certificate of need and other processes to have the lowest cost to show that it's a reasonable thing. So I'm disappointed, but I understand.
Thank you, Mr. Senator Marty. Just before I go to Senator Matthews, the chair has been rather aggressive in believing he could get 2 bills through this committee in an hour and a half. I certainly didn't want to come back at 10 o'clock, but I do want to complete this bill by 2:30. Senate File 214 will be pushed to February 7th at 1 p.m. inside of this chamber. Senator Matthews.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And let me just briefly address a point that this bill has been something I have focused on with my district for a number of months. This bill has only been something I've been working with Mr. Evans on for a matter of weeks. I have been working in my district. If Senator Marty or anyone else had followed me around and spoken with the people that I've spoken to for well over a year, for many months now, they would know this is exactly what my district is needing and is asking for. And to Senator Marty's point, until October, we did not think this bill would be necessary today. But because of decisions that we felt were not correctly decided, that continued to leave the district hanging in doubt. A process for 2 long years went through with people that you will hear from shortly in testimony. We'll talk about following this process for 2 years. I knew that we needed to quickly move forward on this to give some certainty to my district.
Thank you, Senator Matthews. Senator Goggin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I love charts, Mr. Evans, I really do. So while you were talking, being an engineer, I took out and figured out all the numbers that are the total generation that's going to change between 2023 and 2040 for Xcel Energy's plants. You're looking at 4.53 gigawatts of energy that's going to transition somehow, some way into some form in the next 23 years. That's not a lot of time to do this, okay? I also took and went and looked up the High Bridge, the Riverside, and the Black Dog plants, the size of those plants. Those are all natural gas plants, correct?
Correct.
Mr. Evans.
So If you,
Senator Goggins, sorry.
so if you take the Riverside and the Black Dog plant, add the 454 megawatts at Riverside, the 282 megawatts at Black Dog, you come up with 736 megawatts. With analogous estimating, how close would you be in the cost of building that 786 megawatt gas plant at Becker?
Mr. Evans.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I'm not an engineer, and I hesitate to speculate just because I know in Black Dog the gas plant was placed in the existing coal plant building. I believe that also was the case at Riverside. At High Bridge, it was more like what we intend at Becker, where we'll build a separate building. However, at Becker, the gas plant will be attached at the Sherco 3 end of the existing building, so I hesitate to speculate about the costs. I guess it's probably fair to say they would be comparable, but I hesitate to speculate.
Senator Goggins.
So when you're looking at replacing Sherco 1 and 2 in 2023 and 2026, and going along with Senator Marty's discussion about the cost of capital, the cost of doing this, how long will it take to put together a design package once you have the size of the plant that your engineers have determined needs to be put in that spot? How long will it take to do the design, the implementation of that typically would take on that?
Mr. Evans.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, our current plan is to start construction of the Sherco gas plant in 2021. We have provided in this statute, in the author's amendment, that 20 months before that, we would have to present a forecasted budget to the Public Utilities Commission, along with an independent analysis of that budget. I think it's probably not unfair. I don't want to claim any expertise, but there would be a significant amount of lead time, obviously, to get the plant up to a design point where we could present a forecasted budget that was useful.
Senator Goggins.
And along with that, when you redid the High Bridge, Riverside, and Black Dog plants, do you have any idea how long the lead time was for getting the materials, the equipment there, in order to do that modification?
Mr. Evans.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I don't, but I will get that for you. I should know that because I was around at the time, from the time we proposed it until the time the plant went online, but I don't remember it off the top of my head.
No, I just look at the short
Senator
time
Goggins.
frame between now and, I apologize, sure, between now and 2023, we're looking at 6 years. And there's a lot of work that needs to be done, regardless of what type of plant goes in there, whether it be a natural gas plant or not. And so there's a lot of work that needs to be done ahead of time. And I think, along with this, we're looking at significant transition, and I'm concerned about our baseload power in this state to meet our future needs of our businesses and our residential, our residents of the state. And, I want to be sure that my lights come on and my air conditioning works. And being a union member, I want to see my union members working at Xcel Energy plants and building Xcel Energy plants too. So I'll end it there, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Dibble.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thankfully, Senator Marty took most of my questions, so I'll be hopefully brief. I just have a couple of quick questions for Mr. Evans. One is, it might be picking up a little bit on where Senator Goggins left off. I just want to be clear, because I think I'm hearing and reading different things. One is we're concerned and we want predictability in light of the fact that some major baseload generators might be taken off. Well, two of them we know are going to be taken offline, and then we've got the nuclear power plants coming up for licensure renewal. But then so we're worried about possible loss of future baseload, or we're anticipating more demand for generation because of population growth and the like. So is it both, or is it one or the other that we're hoping to build this plant in anticipation of?
Sure.
Mr. Evans.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, the resource planning process looks at both of those things. There is an extensive number of runs of computer programs that essentially model the future. And there's always some uncertainty because you're trying to model how large is the population going to grow, how fast is it going to grow, how much energy are they going to need, are they going to run their air conditioners, are the air conditioners going to be more efficient or less efficient, are more businesses that are large energy users moving into the area. All of those things go into a 15-year resource plan, and then the other side of it also goes into it. What assets do we have that can provide that energy? What assets do we need that can provide that energy? And what's the best model? Also goes into that is speculation about the price of fuel, the availability of fuel, the regulatory restrictions on perhaps building another nuclear plant or building another coal plant. All of those things go into the resource plan. It's a very extensive process, which is why it takes, a number of years from the day we file it until the day we get an order, or at least over a year. I shouldn't say a number of years. I think our last one was about 18 months. But at any rate, it takes a while to sort through all of that with all the various stakeholders.
Senator Dibble.
Thanks. And just quickly to follow up on this matter, Mr. Evans. So, how much do we think is conceivably saved or offset through Xcel's very outstanding conservation and efficiency efforts? I mean, I'm looking at a chart here. It shows the trend lines on demand and real demand, not just per capita, but overall demand going down because of conservation efficiency being very, very successful. A lot more ways to go in terms of how we build buildings, retrofit buildings, consumer products, what we do on the industrial side, the transmission side, et cetera. How much do we think we can anticipate gaining in terms of avoided new generation needs?
Mr. Evans.
Mr. Chair, Senator Dibble, I don't know the number, but what I can do, that's another variable I left out. We clearly, as part of our estimation of what the demand for energy is going to be in the next 15 years as we do our resource plan, part of that calculation is what kind of conservation programs will be implemented, what kind of conservation will be available to our customers, how will that be implemented? That's all a part of the calculation. It's all a part of the consideration. What are the plants we have? What are the plants we need? How much energy are our customers going to demand? It's not, as I'm sure you can imagine, a precise science. We have to speculate to some degree about what all of that is going to be, and yet it still takes years to build a plant. So this is why the process works the way that it does.
Senator Dibble.
So Mr. Chair, Mr. Evans, don't you think these are the kinds of factors, among others, that go into the decision that the Public Utilities Commission would take in as they go through a certificate of need process. So you're telling me we don't know, but you're asking us to make this major decision, and those would be some of the things that the PUC would know before they would make this decision, and you're asking us to make the decision today without some specificity of answers and research and ability to forecast. Do you think it's fair that we should know those answers and figure out how to factor those in before we approve this particular project of this particular scale and size?
Mr. Evans?
Mr. Chair, Senator Dibble, and one of the reasons that we added the language to the author's amendment was so that we can come back in the next resource plan, which will be filed in 2019, and take another look at all of these variables and how they all fit together, and make a joint determination with the Public Utilities Commission about the size of this plant. I guess the other thing that I would say is that while the certificate of need is a tool, the resource plan is a tool, the rate case is a tool, but as I pointed out, the legislature is also a group that gets together. I know you thought I was going to say it, didn't you? The legislature is another body that gets together and makes public policy decisions about generation resources that is outside of the certificate of need. It's happened, quite a number of times, as I pointed out, and it's a part of the process that we deal with, just like the other processes that you're talking about.
So,
Senator Dibble?
Thank you, Mr. Chair Goggin. Just one more quick point on this, and then I have another small question. Mr. Evans, one point to that point, which I appreciate. I mean, I do appreciate the amendment, and I think I understand what you're trying to accomplish here, and so don't misunderstand me. I do appreciate the movement that this amendment represents. Doesn't quite get me there, but I appreciate it. But on that point, are you familiar with the interpretation? 2 points. One is that it's still at Xcel's initiative whether or not to consider revisiting the resizing of the facility in the next IRP, and should a different determination be made, like scaling it down, Xcel would still maintain its right via this language to build to the larger size. I mean, that's an interpretation that was shared with me in the last few hours.
Mr. Evans?
Mr. Chair, Senator Dibble, that's correct. That's the way we interpret the law as well, the amendment as well.
All right. So it's kind of a revisit maybe, and quite possibly not. Then my second question or point, or I guess point and then question is, I appreciate the argument that you make that some of these other kinds of generation have not been subject to the certificate of need, but rather by statutory requirement by the legislature. But often, many of these, like wind and solar, before you sign the contract and acquire the generation from a particular developer or source, there's a competitive bidding process. So at least that gives you some ability to control for costs or get a better price. So that offsets a little bit of the lack of there being a certificate of need process. So how do you respond to that, and or perhaps you could go to a competitive bidding process for this facility?
Mr. Evans.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, and Senator Dibble, I probably shouldn't say every one of those cases, but in the vast majority of those cases, those costs of energy are not subjected to a rate case. They flow through the fuel clause, and so it's perfectly appropriate to make sure that that money, so when we purchase wind energy, for example, from a private developer, whether we've gone out and bid it or whatever, that cost never goes through a rate case. That cost flows straight through to our customers in our fuel clause. And so that's an appropriate, it's different. It's different than what we're proposing here, certainly, but it's just another one of the ways of safeguarding. I'd point to the High Bridge and the Riverside plant, on the other hand, where we did exactly what we're proposing to do here, which is have Xcel Energy build the plant in those locations where the generation was already located. And of course, we did seek bids for building the plant. We don't go out and sign sole source contracts to build things. We go out and find a competitive price for the stuff that we want to build. We don't have a construction wing of our company, and so that process would be followed. But it's every one of these examples that I've cited is different from this one. Some of them didn't require all of them didn't require a certificate of need. Many of them never went through a resource plan. Lots of them don't go through rate cases. They go through other processes. So yeah, there's a lot of differences out there. But this is similar to the High Bridge and Riverside plant, where I think people were very happy with the result that we had in terms of we weren't worried about carbon dioxide in that case. We were worried about air quality in the Twin Cities and the need to close those 2 downtown coal plants. That was a legislative decision, not driven by other environmental regulations, and I think people were pretty happy with the result, and we think they'll be happy with this result too.
Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the interest of time, I'll just skip right now.
Fair enough. I appreciate that. We have about 40 minutes left, and we do have 5 testifiers left on the list. Next up, Senator. Thank you, Mr. Evans. I promoted you or demoted you, depending on how you look at the Senate. Next up on the list is Mayor Tracy Bertram of Becker. And if I could also have Andy Snope, legislative and political, for IBEW. Mayor, welcome to the committee. Please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you. Tracy Bertram, Mayor of Becker. The city of Becker has a population of about 4,600 people. The community has hosted the Sherco plant since the 1970s. The city's interest in the Sherco facility is substantial, as the 4,500-acre site constitutes about 62% of the city's geographical footprint. The Sherco facility employs close to 300 regular full-time and contract support workers. In addition, during special projects, the facility hosts 500-plus contracted employees. Many people from both sides reside within Becker and Sherburne County. With the decision to decommission Units 1 and 2, the overall number of jobs available at the Sherco site will be approximately half. The loss of those payroll dollars will be felt by our community, and impact those jobs being lost is devastating. The news of the decommissioning sent waves of uncertainty through our city, not only with our citizens, but our business owners. Your decision to locate the power plant in Becker will assure certainty and calm in our community. In addition to being the major taxpayer in Becker, Xcel accounts for 75% of the city's tax base. Xcel Energy and the Sherco plant have been stable partners in the community and have demonstrated a commitment to promoting economic development in central Minnesota. Xcel Energy and the Sherco plant have always had strong partners and advocates and participants in various philanthropic activities, including fundraisers for the United Way, internships for local high schoolers, cleanup of the Mississippi River, and the list could go on. We support a natural gas plant in Becker for several reasons. First, this positive impact in living wage jobs during the construction phase of the project. We also would like the synergy of the large construction project happening in our community. And we welcome the long-term jobs created to operate that plant. The building of this gas plant in Becker will create new economic development opportunities and help our community transition from a coal-based economy. We like the fact that there is no land acquisition cost. The property of Becker is suitable for power generation, and few, if any, improvements to the transmission system. The siting of a combined cycle gas plant in Sherco at the Sherco site will supply steam to Liberty Paper, who's a valued Xcel customer and an important employer in the Becker area, and a critical part of Minnesota's recycling industry. We know this decision will have a profound impact on the city's tax base, regional employment, income for Sherco employees, and businesses located throughout the Becker and Sherburne County. We urge the committee to help diminish those impacts by constructing the natural gas plant on the existing Sherco site. While the closure of Units 1 and 2 will have a detrimental impact on our tax base, employment, and disposable income in central Minnesota, we can reduce those impacts by constructing this gas plant in Becker. We can transition the local workforce, provide new investments locally, promote economic development, and provide cost-effective, reliable power for everyone, which benefits all ratepayers. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the opportunity to speak and convey our support.
Thank you, Mayor. Are there any questions for this witness? Seeing none. Next is Andy Snope,
Mr.
IBEW.
Chair, I will also briefly introduce, he doesn't have prepared testimony, but it's Becker City Council member Rick Hendrickson. He closely followed this process through the PUC for the last 2 years, and if there are questions, he's available to discuss the impact from the city for these last couple of years. So just at least wanted to give him the recognition.
Thank you, Senator Matthews. And just being an 11-year city council member, I know how it's always important to make sure you're here for your mayor in case they don't quite make the cut. So thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Next up, IBEW, Mr. Snope, and also Mike Bull, Center for Energy and Environment.
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Senator Marty.
Just real quickly, while they're coming up, I wanted to say that I hope, I'm not sure if anybody in the Senate is working on or will be, but former Tax Chair Rod Skoy had a provision on trying to redo the utility property tax thing so it was fair to the local communities because it's been such a boom and bust thing. That's irrespective of this bill, that's something I think we ought to be doing because, I mean, I think the mayor said it's 75% of their tax base. And I think the stability of it when it just plunges and then open up a new one, I think the proposal had some good ideas and I think utilities and the utility cities thought it was a good idea. So I'd just like to encourage colleagues, whoever is on tax committee, to be working on that.
Thank you, Senator Marty. Next is Andy Snope, IBEW. Please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Osmick and members of the committee. Thank you for allowing me to testify in support of Senate File 85. My name is Andy Snope. I am a Legislative Director of the IBEW Minnesota State Council. I'm speaking on behalf of 16,000 IBEW members in the electrical industry in the state of Minnesota. Today, I'm also speaking on behalf of 79,000 members of the Minnesota State Building Trades. We are happy to support Senator Matthews here on his bill and our partners Xcel Energy in their request to see a bill passed and help them get on track to build a gas-burning electrical production facility at the Xcel Energy coal-burning facility in Becker, Minnesota. For many years, building trades members and IBEW members have worked with Xcel Energy to build, maintain, and operate the Xcel Energy Sherco plant in Becker. It's a good partnership which has provided for countless craft hours of work for our members while providing quality, skilled craftsmanship to our partners and customer, Xcel Energy. This summer, the Minnesota PUC accepted Xcel Energy's latest resource plan. In that resource plan, Xcel Energy has plans to shut down coal power generators 1 and 2 at Sherco. This plan has a potential loss of 150 to 200 IBEW jobs at the facility. While a gas facility will never provide as many jobs as the current coal-burning facilities do, building this gas facility will help save some of those jobs for operators and engineers at the current facility. These jobs will help to continue to provide for good wages and benefits for our members and their families. Not only will this bill help save IBEW jobs in the operation of the new gas plant, but it will also create hundreds and maybe thousands of building trades jobs to convert the current coal-burning generators to gas-operated burners. Jobs for all crafts related to building and construction a new facility: electricians, pipe fitters, boiler makers, carpenters, laborers, equipment operators, sheet metal workers, painters, iron workers, plasters, many more. Please consider supporting Senate File 85 and supporting jobs for our members, especially those who will be losing their jobs through the conversion of these coal-burning generators to clean-burning natural gas. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you, Chair Osmick.
Thank you, Mr. Snope. Questions from the committee? Seeing none, Mr. Bull. Welcome to the committee. Please state your name and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the committee, I'm Mike Bull. I'm the Policy Director at the Center for Energy and Environment. We're a 40-year-old clean energy nonprofit headquartered in Minneapolis. We support Senate File 85 as amended. Many of the changes that Senator Matthews has made to the bill were recommended by us, and we appreciate his and Xcel Energy's willingness to work with us. We also appreciate the work that the Department of Commerce, the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce, and the Minnesota Citizens Utility Board have done to make the bill better. We supported the Becker natural gas plant during the Commission's review of the Xcel Energy's integrated resource plan that's been referenced here today. We knew from our negotiations with Xcel around Sherco 1 and 2 over the past several years, almost from the day I joined CE in 2013, that the natural gas plant at Becker was a critical component of a package that Xcel Energy ended up proposing in October of 2015, which included early retirement of those units, about 1,800 megawatts of wind, 1,400 megawatts of solar, and a commitment to continue Xcel Energy's nation-leading energy efficiency achievements for another 15 years, referenced by Senator Dibble earlier. The gas plant, I think, as you've heard on the Sherco site, was important to Xcel for several reasons. They needed replacement generation and rate base. Studies of operation on the transmission system indicated a need for thermal generation at that Sherco site. The utility is facing a logjam that Rick Evans referred to of potential power plants retirements in the early 2030s. And members, it's not just Xcel's power plants in that time frame as well. There are other utility power plants that could be set to retire in that time frame. It is a real issue, and I think it's good that you are taking some notice of it. The gas plant would also help mitigate impacts on the local economy from the early retirements of the Sherco units, both for the city of Becker and the surrounding area, and that was important to Xcel. In fact, the gas plant was so important to Xcel that I'm certain they would not have been able to offer the clean energy commitments to that resource plan the massive commitments to wind, solar, and efficiency, along with significant carbon emissions reductions if the gas plant wasn't part of that package. And thus, the gas plant was the linchpin for the biggest clean energy announcement since passage of the landmark clean energy legislation enacted in 2007, which I worked on for Governor Pawlenty and which many others in the room worked on as well. So that's the reason why we were supportive of the gas plant. At the commission, the Department of Commerce had provided quite a bit of analytic support for the gas plant, and there was quite a bit of support amongst the commissioners for the gas plant. But ultimately, the commission decided to direct Xcel to start a certificate of need proceeding, as we've discussed. I'm confident, as you are, Senator Dibble, that the certificate of need, Senator Marty, excuse me, that the certificate of need proceeding on the gas plant would have resulted in approval for a plant at Becker, but I also understand the community's need for certainty about its construction and the jobs and tax base that come along with it. A final thought, a lot's been said about the need for commission process to oversee the ratepayer impacts of this natural gas plant. We absolutely agree with that need and have worked on, with the author and Xcel Energy and others to ensure that the commission has appropriate oversight over both the cost recovery of the gas plant costs as well as the opportunity to review the appropriate size of the plant. Under the author's amendment, the cost of the gas plant will be reviewed for prudence and reasonableness in a rate case, and the size of the plant will be reviewed in a subsequent resource plans. Thus, the bill would subject the gas plant to more commission oversight and process than the very analogous situation that's been referenced earlier, the $1.2 billion project, the Metropolitan Emissions Reduction Project in the early 2000s, to retire 2 Xcel Energy metro area coal plants and replace them with a significant amount of natural gas generation. The MERP natural gas plants were exempt from certificate of need, as well as continued resource plan review, and the costs were not subject to the soup to nuts rate impact review of a rate case. Instead, those costs were recovered through a special rate rider. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'll say thank you for the opportunity to express support and look forward to any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Bull. Any questions from the committee? Senator Marty.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Bull, if you worked on the language of the amendment, just looking at it, it says it's the sole discretion of the utility to construct and operate the natural gas plant in Becker, or as revised by the utility. Why do you have the word "or" in there? Why doesn't it just say may construct and own it as proposed the PUC in the docket, as revised by the utility, if revised? I mean, in other words, you're saying that you can choose whether to revise it or not. They will be issuing an IRP, and it may come in at 786. It may come in higher or lower. Why the word "or"?
Mr. Bull.
Mr. Chair, Senator Marty, I think it's a distinction without a difference, to tell you the truth. Having worked with at a utility, if the commission in a future resource plan determines that the need for that facility is only, say, 600 megawatts instead of the 783, and that's what they made their decision as the need for that facility in that resource plan, Xcel Energy is not going to come forward with a plan to construct a 783 megawatt. They're just not going to put that capital at risk. The market wouldn't let them. The regulators wouldn't let them recover those costs. So as a practical matter, it's a distinction without a difference.
Senator Marty.
Mr. Chair, I'm not an attorney, but I think it would be a little more clear if you took out the "or," if what you're saying is true, that they would be forced to revise it if so, because it strikes me that if say the revised one would say it should be 700 instead of 780 something, right now, reasonably and prudently incurred investments could well be taken to be, well, the law said we have our sole discretion to construct this thing here. So I'm not sure whether "or" is something that people think belongs there or not, but I don't see why it should be, because I think it would make it clear if it wasn't there.
Mr. Bull.
Mr. Chair, Senator Marty, this is the language that a lot of people have come around in support of, I think.
Senator Goggin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Bull, going along the question with Mr. Marty about, the size of the plant, who's best capable to come up with the determination of the size of the plant?
Mr. Bull?
Mr. Chair, Senator Goggin, as a former resource planner for Xcel, I probably would say that it's Xcel, that they have the best understanding of their needs, of their system. They have the best analytic capability, but that does need to be tested in the regulatory proceedings. The Department of Commerce has fantastic analytic staff. They have some of the same analytic tools that Xcel does, and I think together those, and I should also say in this last resource planning process, the clean energy organizations that intervened in the process brought that same level of analytic capability to bear in this, and did an excellent job too. So I think it's a shared responsibility, but I do think it starts with the utility.
Senator Goggin?
So what you just said is you've got a tiered challenge process all the way through from the time that Xcel's engineers and professionals in designing power plants come up with a number, then you've got additional avenues that people will come through and challenge all of the documentation that goes along with the supporting documentation that came up with the determination of whatever size plant that is. So it's safe to say that we have safeguards in place to make sure that it's properly vetted and you know, the right size fit for the system and for the needs of the state.
Mr. Chair, Senator Goggins, absolutely. It's a very
Thank you. I'm done. Thank you.
Seeing no further questions, thank you, Mr. Bull. We have two individuals in opposition to this, John Munter and a Lee Curry. If you'll approach the podium, please. It needs to go to the page, and I need to take a look at it first.
My name is John Munter from Morba, Minnesota, just south of Grand Rapids.
Just a moment, sir. Thank you, sir. Please state your name for the record, and please proceed with your testimony.
My name is John Munter, Johnmunter, and I'm from Morba, Minnesota. My condolences first for your loss, and senators. I come to oppose SF 85 because we have no idea what the cost of natural gas is going to be in 10 years. So this should be vetted by the Commerce Department, the appropriate agency on that one. This is because China, India, and Europeans are going to electric vehicles, and world oil demand is going to be crashing in the mid-2020s. China spent $13 billion in 2015 to jumpstart their electric vehicle program. India has a government goal to be totally EV, electric vehicle, by 2030. And there's a list of prognosticators that I have here that would project this also, are Michael Sui of Deutsche Bank. There's the rating agency Fitch. World Energy Council puts the year at 2030. Michael Labrick of Bloomberg's New Energy Finance talks about 23 to 28, and even Shell's chief financial officer, Simon Henry, is quoted as saying that peak oil demand will arrive somewhere between 5 and 15 years hence. And in this country, if we have another big hit to the oil, it's going to take down also the natural gas supply as well, because it's a byproduct of oil, of fracking oil. We'll be at the mercy of whatever the Asian gas price is, because we have 5 new LNG ports right now. And so we're in an international market in about 5 years. And their rates will probably be high because they have high demand. China actually increased their import of oil or natural gas 30% in 2015. This would be a good thing, actually, from my perspective, because frac natural gas is 3 times the carbon equivalent footprint of coal. If you ask Robert Howarth on the second page here, he's got a nifty graph here. He says that shale gas is 3 times worse in terms of a carbon equivalent footprint as coal is because of the methane leakage. And I'll cede the rest of my time to anyone else who wants to speak against the project.
Thank you, Mr. Munter. Are there any questions for that testimony, this testifier? Seeing none, Lee Curry, please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, my name is Lee Curry. I am a staff attorney at the Minnesota Center for Environmental Advocacy. I primarily practice at the Public Utilities Commission. I represent several clean energy organizations at the PUC, including Fresh Energy, Sierra Club, Wind on the Wires, and MCEA. With me today is Alan Gleckner from Fresh Energy, also available to answer questions from the committee. MCEA and the groups that I represent are testifying in opposition to Senate File 85. We have two primary concerns with this bill. The first is the precedent that it sets, and the second is that it prioritizes shareholders over the public interest of the state of Minnesota. This bill is bad precedent. Xcel Energy is a monopoly. We have a system in place to ensure that the public interest is protected from monopolies. The system includes checks and balances. The PUC can only act within the authority delegated to it by the legislature. And within this authority, the PUC can exercise its judgment based on the record built before it. If there were an argument that the PUC acted outside of its authority in this case or abused its discretion, there is a mechanism to challenge that within the judicial branch. But that's not the argument being made here today. Nobody is making these arguments. Instead, Xcel is asking you to do the PUC's job for it. Just 3 months ago, I sat at the commission with Xcel Energy, arguing about its resource plan, and I listened to Xcel Energy ask the PUC to allow it to please move forward with a certificate of need process. Exercising its discretion, the PUC did what it always does when it determines there is a need for a new resource, whether it's wind, solar, natural gas, an unspecified fuel type. It authorizes the utility to either go forward and issue an RFP or apply for a certificate of need. In this case, the PUC did what Xcel asked it to do and authorized Xcel to go forward with a certificate of need. The PUC and Xcel both understood that a certificate of need proceeding is required by state law and that there was sufficient time to determine the exact parameters of the plant. The PUC in this process considered 2 years' worth of record development and arguments from the parties, and determined that there were gaps in information, there was out-of-date information, including the demand forecast, and there was inaccurate information in the record. And it determined that there was time to finalize the exact parameters, the precise nature of this gas plant, through the state-required certificate of need process. What the PUC did in this proceeding is exactly what the law states it must do and what Xcel asked it to do. Allowing Xcel to opt out of this system of checks and balances because it might not get exact parameters that it asked for of the plant once the right information is in front of the PUC is sending the wrong message. This bill, unlike the MERP statute that you just heard Mr. Bull talk about and Mr. Evans discuss earlier, it does not create a statutory framework in order to achieve a policy goal. The MERP statute was a framework in order to achieve emission reductions. Those projects had to be vetted and approved by the PUC. That's not what's happening here. There's no identified goal here. This is simply a bypass lane around the PUC for a one-time $1 billion project. It's nothing more. And the second concern is that the project itself, the $1 billion investment, prioritizes shareholders over ratepayers. The way the bill is written, even as amended to approve the $1 billion project, puts shareholder interests ahead of the public. If this bill were actually about jobs or regulatory certainty, you would see language in the bill about jobs. But it's not about jobs. It's about a $1 billion one-time project. There's no need to bypass the PUC or a certificate of need in order to have a gas plant on site at Becker, have the certainty and the jobs that the community deserves and is looking for. If this bill does pass, you've locked in a $1 billion investment that is not needed for 10 years. In the IRP process, it was clear that Xcel's system is currently over capacity. The first coal unit at Churco shutting down in 2023 does not trigger a need for anything to be built. It's the second unit shutting down in 2026 that triggers a need for something to be built. The reason the bill in front of you doesn't simply guarantee a gas plant or simply guarantee jobs at the end of the certificate of need, which is a legislation that could be in front of you if those were the real concerns, is because the size of the plant is key to Xcel. And the reason the size of the plant is so important is because the size of the plant equals the size of the investment equals the size of the return. And that goes to shareholders at the expense of ratepayers. And as you've heard Xcel and others agree, this bill, even as amended, gives Xcel the sole discretion to build a 786 megawatt gas plant that it proposed in the last IRP, or in its sole discretion, it could propose a different size in a future IRP. Xcel claims that its ratepayers will be protected because it has to go through a rate case, but the risk seems to be minimal that a plant authorized by the legislature would be deemed to be unreasonable by the Public Utilities Commission. So I don't think there's a balancing of the risk, and I think it prioritizes shareholders over the public interest. So my clients and I are here today to ask you to respect the system that has been built and that we have in place today to protect the public against the interests of shareholders of a monopoly. This bill does not do that. And I thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer questions, as well as Alan Gleckner.
Thank you, Ms. Curry. Just for clarification, members, the handout, Ms. Curry, that's from you, the Forbes article, is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, that's correct.
Thank you. Just want to make sure that was clear. Sir, did you have anything additional to add?
No, thank you,
Okay.
Mr. Chair, just here in case there's other questions.
Okay, thank you. Members, any questions or comments? Senator Marty?
Mr. Chair, maybe for Ms. Curry and then maybe Xcel or somebody on the amendment on line 1.8, the issue I was getting at, striking the word "or," I'm not sure is the right one, but I'm wondering what was explained, and again, Xcel and others should comment on it too, but I wanted to ask Ms. Curry while she's there, and that is the Xcel has the sole discretion to own this as proposed in the docket, or, and if you struck instead the words "as revised by the utility" and "or approved by the PUC in the latest resource plan filed." In other words, Xcel is filing a new IRP in 2019. That would take out any clarity about, any confusion about whether they have the sole discretion to go ahead with 786, even if the PUC thought a smaller plan size fit in that time, regardless of what they filed, then whatever was approved through the process. I'm wondering if that language would help do more with the appropriate sizing than that I think you've expressed some concern about. I think lots of us have concern about. I'm not saying you'd support the bill with that, but I'm just asking if that would be better language.
Ms. Curry?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Marty, thank you for the question. Striking the word "or" would clarify that the upcoming resource planning process that is scheduled to begin February 1st, 2019 would have to occur, and then the outcome of that resource planning process would be the size of the plant that could be built. So I do think it would resolve that question. I would still have concerns over the bill because there are considerations that go into a certificate of need proceeding that are not considered in a resource planning proceeding. There's a reason we have two proceedings. There is a mechanism to have a joint proceeding wherein the statutory factors that are required to be considered as part of a certificate of need are considered as part of a resource plan, so that would be an option. I'd have concerns, though, that that language is not in the bill requiring those statutory factors, which include socioeconomic considerations, the cost, the need. Are there better, more cost-effective ways to meet this need? Those should be considered, and in the resource planning process, there are different considerations. It's a different type of proceeding.
Senator Marty?
Mr. Chair, but in other words, you were saying if you were to make it more clear that the latest IRP has to be part of it, you would strike the word "or," as I originally said, not strike the words "as revised by the utility." In other words, they do have to file the IRP, and it does have to be approved by the PUC, but you're saying if you struck the word "or," it would accomplish the goal of making sure that if that new process said it should be 50 megawatts smaller or something, that would be taking care of it. So striking the word "or" would be the way you would propose to do it if so.
Ms. Curry?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Marty, striking the word "or" would move us in that direction.
Okay.
The other words, I think, in that sentence that that give us some pause are "by the utility." So if it read, proposed to the Public Utilities Commission in docket 1521, as revised and approved by the PUC in the latest resource plan filed, I think that would very clearly get at what you are discussing.
Senator Marty, follow-up?
Mr. Chair, I would ask Excel that before, if possible.
Very well.
But no more questions here.
Seeing no additional questions, thank you for your testimony. Before we come back to Excel, are there any other individuals in the room that wish to testify on Senate File 85? Yes, sir. Please come to the podium and grab a chair and give us your name for the record. Before Mr. Evans, we have one additional testifier in the back that's coming forward. So please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony. Welcome to the committee.
Thanks. My name is Ken Gravy. I'm just some guy off the street. Thanks for listening to me, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I'm strongly opposed to the idea of a legislative mandate to add another several decades of fossil fuel burning to Minnesota. If the question is about jobs, there's plenty of research that shows that renewables create a lot more jobs than fossil fuel electric generation. If the concern is about rates, projections clearly show that renewable prices will only go down and gas prices can only go up in the long term. If the concern is about the environment, back when we converted some coal plants to gas, the understanding was that gas was clearly had a much lower impact on climate change than coal burning. Now that we're getting a lot of our gas via fracking, there's a lot of concern that because of leakage, that natural gas has a much worse climate impact than even coal. If the concern is about the stability of the economy around Becker and the beneficial reuse of this site, and also the reliability of baseload, why not use that site with its transmission capacity already in place for some sort of renewable energy storage facility? And then we can have our stability of the local economy, we can have our baseload handled, and we can improve the ability of Minnesota to use renewables all around. That's all I have. I'll take my seat unless you have any questions.
Only one thing. Could you please, sir, spell your first and last name? We just want to make sure we have it accurate for the record.
Sure. Ken, just K-E-N, and then the last name, Gravy, is G-R-A-E-V-E.
Thank you, sir. Very good. Thank you for your testimony. Mr. Evans, I believe Senator Marty has some questions for you. Welcome back to the committee.
Thank you.
Senator Marty.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Evans. Again, on that one issue, we could talk longer about other things, but I wanted to ask about the one issue, because the way I think you were suggesting this was that if the new IRP suggested a different size, bigger or smaller, that would be something that Excel would be doing, but the language here basically gives you discretion about whether any changes should occur with it. And if we took out the word "or" and "by the utility," so it would be that you have your sole discretion to construct, own, and operate the plant is in the current docket as revised and approved by the PUC in the latest resource plan. Then if through whatever you file, they felt and they worked out and the final agreement was to change the size, I'm assuming more likely slightly rather than significantly, but I don't know, does that language change? Because I assume you were the ones who, I mean, I heard a team of people were working on this amendment, but.
Mr. Evans.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, and Senator Marty, you know, the purpose of this bill for the city of Becker and for the jobs is to establish some certainty about this plant. We think that this current language establishes that certainty. You know, Mr. Bull testified that, and I think our history of working in the state of Minnesota, in spite of Ms. Curry's suspicion about us, is that we build the system to provide energy safely, reliably, and as cleanly as possible to our customers. We think this language gives us the certainty we need to go forward. You know, there's lots of wordsmithing that we could do to change all kinds of words in here, but at some point, you know, what we're trying to accomplish, I think, is accomplished by the language in the bill. It gives the certainty that people are looking for. You know, I'm sure Senator Matthews, or I shouldn't speak for him, but, you know, Senator Matthews can sit down with you and talk about, you know, further amendments, but we've been working on this for a long time. Well, for this session, it's a long time at any rate, for the last 3 or 4 weeks. This is not a suggestion that's been brought to us before. We're comfortable with the language we've got. We think it provides all the safety that our customers need and the security and certainty that the other testifiers are looking for.
Follow-up, Senator Murray?
Mr. Chair, but Mr. Evans, then, in other words, but the reason I was asking that is because it strikes me that there's vagueness here about whether you have to, if the IRP would come in suggesting a different level, whether you have that you have sole discretion to move forward with it, the existing size, even if the other one was somewhat different. And you're saying, at least Mr. Bull seemed to be saying, he didn't think you would do that. And I'm guessing, because you want certainty, you're saying you want certainty for your shareholders. I'm saying for the ratepayers and everybody else, maybe it would be helpful to have a little more certainty on the other side, if we're doing the end run.
Mr. Evans.
Mr. Chair, Senator Marty, I guess I'm not sure what the question is. You know, in the years you've been doing this longer than I have, you know, you can always wordsmith documents and move commas and all of that sort of thing. I think the language we've got here expresses the intention of the proponents of the bill. I'm not sure what it is you want me to say.
Well, Senator Marty, if you are ready, if you're going to wordsmith, what I would like to do is Senator Goggin is next on the list. We'll have Senator Matthews wrap up, and then we will take any amendments or comments or changes you might want. Go ahead. Senator Goggin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Evans, earlier in your testimony, you talked about getting recovery back from the PUC later on. So the PUC still is going to see this before it's even built. Is that correct? They're going to see your plan before you even build this facility, correct?
Mr. Evans? Yeah, Mr. Chair, Senator Goggin, they're actually going to see it twice. They're going to see it when we file our 2019 resource plan. Obviously, a resource plan, I mean, one of the things we're trying to prevent here is having a big hole in the middle of our resource plan in terms of a variable for this plant. So by 2019, we will be presenting a resource plan which will include all of the plants that we currently have on our system and all of the plants that we are planning in the future, including this one. So that would be one opportunity to look at it. In addition, we provided the opportunity in paragraph C so that 20 months prior to starting construction, we'll be back in front of the PUC with a forecasted budget and an independent evaluation of that budget. Obviously, an independent evaluator is going to look at the plant we are proposing and measure it against the budget we are proposing. So once again, the PUC will have in front of it the plant that we are proposing and the forecasted budget. So there will be two opportunities for the PUC to see this plant again before we actually start construction. And then they will see it a third time after it's used and useful and put in service, when we will come in and try to convince them that the cost was reasonable and prudently incurred and should be passed through to our ratepayers.
Senator Goggin.
Okay, so, and I want to understand how this plant's going to be operated if and when it's built. You've got the wind, you've got the solar out there. Is this going to be a load follower plant to offset when those facilities are not generating enough power?
Mr. Evans.
Mr. Chair, Senator Goggin, yes, this is what we would refer to as an intermediate plant. It's not really a peaking plant, which we turn on the hottest days when our customers are demanding the most energy. Because it's a combined cycle plant, it's a very efficient plant, slightly more expensive to build than a combustion turbine, but much more efficient in terms of the use of the production of energy per cubic foot of natural gas. So this would be an intermediate plant. It would not be run, it's not a baseload plant. It doesn't run 24/7. It runs as the system needs. Obviously, if the wind is blowing a gale or the sun is shining brightly and we have more energy on our system, this was the plant we would turn off. If the wind is dead, the sun's not shining, it's 105 degrees at 6 o'clock I guess the sun would still be shining some at 6 o'clock, but this is the plant we would turn on to follow everyone's air conditioning.
Senator Goggin.
Okay, so with that, lost my train of thought, I apologize. This will actually help out with the clean energy portion of this, because that plant is not going to be running at that elevated level all the time. I'm consuming as much natural gas as, if you're running at full bore, 100% power. Is that correct?
Mr. Evans?
Mr. Chair, Senator Goggin, that's absolutely correct. As you probably know better than I do, coal plants are not great at turning up and turning down, turning them off and turning them on. They were designed to run differently than that. Nuclear plants even more so. You don't turn those off. You run those 24/7. But if you're going to build, and I think Mr. Bull referenced his numbers are, anyway, if you're going to build 1,500 or so megawatts of wind and 1,400 megawatts of solar to replace the coal plants that we're shutting down, you have to have something there to turn on when the wind's not blowing and the sun's not shining, and that's what this plant would be for. One of my bosses used to say, if you like wind, you better like gas, because there's no way you can make the wind work without the gas.
Senator Goggin, wrapping up.
This is my last comment. This goes back to a discussion I had back when I was in Colorado back in the early 90s, and I had a gentleman come in from the National Renewable Energy Labs, and he basically said the same thing. You've got to have some kind of baseload power to back everything up, and so I'm looking at long-term growth for the state of Minnesota. I'm looking at reliability of the grid and everything else. So with that, I'll end my comment.
Wrapping up, Senator Matthews.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I have been very grateful for all the effort that is put into this, the bipartisan support that we've received on this bill, the input that we've received from so many sources, from Xcel to environmental groups and just about everyone in between, to help us fine-tune this language and make it the best compromise product that we can produce in order to meet the needs both in my community and for all of central Minnesota. So I would move the bill again and ask for members' support.
Senator Matthews moves Senate File 85. Are there any further discussion or amendments? Senator Marty.
Mr. Chair, I don't think I'll offer an amendment because I would love to talk further with Xcel and some of the others involved before doing something like that. I don't know that it would have much of a chance, but I do think I want to make sure the language be right if we're to do that. Just one other comment, a couple other comments. One, Mr. Evans was just saying, if you like wind, you better like gas. I thought there are a lot of other ways for balancing it out in terms of the grid, and I think Xcel recognizes and is working on grid management. Plus, as I mentioned earlier, the only reason there's no hydro in the plan is because Xcel's negotiations for that. It's not like that's going to fall off the chart. And all of those things, solar plays a role in filling in for gaps of wind. There are a number of ways to do it. And the whole point is the commission process should do it. I didn't hear anybody from Xcel say a word about they don't think that the PUC timeline is sufficient to give them the chance to build the plant as they want with several years to spare. A couple years to spare. I didn't hear anything about we have to do this. It's only certainty, and I understand Senator Matthews' concern about how community wants certainty too, but I think Xcel's concern is understandably for their shareholders, but I think there's a whole lot of other people in the state, like the ratepayers and everybody else, who ought to be concerned about getting it sized right, and I just don't see I just think that it's hard to make a case, oh, we should oppose something that's likely to happen in some way, shape, or form like this because of the process. But I do think the process matters, and I just do not think that we, as 201 legislators, are the best ones to make the determination in this case when the biggest argument we've heard for it is certainty, because they want certainty earlier rather than later because it's not going to change the timeline on when the plant is built. But with that, I'll ask for roll call, but I do not think this is wise, but I recognize why people are pushing it.
A roll call has been requested. Roll call granted. Thank you. A roll call has been requested. Roll call is granted. Is there any further comments? Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll.
Chair Osmek?
Yes.
Vice Chair Matthews?
Yes.
Senator Marty?
No.
Senator Dibble?
No.
Senator Goggin?
Yes.
Senator Hoffman?
Yes.
Senator Pratt?
Yes.
Senator Rosen?
Yes.
Senator Senjum?
Yes.
By a vote of 7-2, the motion does prevail, and the bill is now sent to the Senate floor. Thank you, Senator Matthews.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
One announcement before we leave. I do have a few more minutes. I'd like, if I could, if these people are in the room, I'd like to speak with them for a few moments. From iTech Solar, Mr. Crumrich. From Winona Renewable Energy, Mr. Golden. Mr. Allen from All Star Solar, and Mr. Fisk from Aquila Solar. If you could stay a little bit later. Again, as I stated earlier in the meeting, we're moving Senate File 214 to February 7th in this room at 1:00 p.m. and seeing no further business before the committee, this committee is adjourned.